Hi, welcome to today's video. My name is Paul. So this week I'm going to look at an aspect of art that maybe I don't often talk about on this channel. It's not relevant to everybody, but I think it will be of some interest, hopefully to at least a few people. And this is the question of, can you make money? Can you earn a living as an artist? The first question you might ask is, why would you even want to do that? Why would you try and make money or earn a living as an artist? And I think the answer is, most of us, most artists, would like to maximize the amount of time that we have to making art. For some people, it's not an issue. These people, maybe the financial side of life is taken care of. Maybe they're retired, maybe they won the lottery last week, who knows. But anyway, financial problems are sort of behind them, and they have a lot of time that they can devote as much as they like, give or take, to making art. And they don't have to worry about trying to sell the art or anything like that. The rest of us, I would say the majority of us, are not in that situation. We're still trying to make money. We still need to make money, earn a living. And we're going to fall into one of three groups, probably. Group one, you have a full-time job and you're trying to squeeze in art into all the little gaps where you have a little bit of free time between doing your full-time job and all of the other commitments you have as an adult in life. It's a difficult situation. I know, I've been there, and even when you do have a bit of free time, you very often feel sort of burnt out and not a huge amount of energy left. So it's far from perfect. The next step up, a little bit better, is if you can get by with a part-time job and then you have a bit more free time and a bit more energy to do art. It's this third option, this third group, that I want to focus on in this video, and that's people who can make a living, earn a living from their art. And then that would be considered probably the best situation for a lot of artists. You're making art and you're somehow generating an income from that art at the same time. How realistic is that? Is it feasible? Is it possible? That's the sort of thing I want to look at in this video. I'm not trying to put anybody off their dreams, but at the same time, I'm not sugarcoating things. I'm not one of those people on YouTube that's saying you can do whatever you want. That's the way life works. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I want to give a more down-to-earth, realistic sort of picture of what it's like to try and earn a living as an artist. Before we get too deep into it, on screen you can see four different artists. These guys all earned or tried to earn a living as full-time artists. On the left you have Gauguin, then Van Gogh. The man with the beard is Claude Monet, and then the last one, smoking a cigarette, is Picasso. I say they were all full-time artists, but they all had very different experiences in art. Gauguin, this is his last ever self-portrait. It was painted in the early part of 1903. He died in May the 8th, 1903. So not long after painting this self-portrait. Next to that, we have Vincent. Slightly unusual self-portrait, as in he's clean shaven. He often has a little beard. These two men, of course, knew each other. They spent a bit of time together. It was not the happiest time for either of them, I don't think, and it all ended quite badly. The whole incident with Vincent cutting off his ear, or part of his ear, was, at least in part, brought on by arguments with Gauguin. But they do have one thing in common: their experience of trying to make a living as a full-time artist was not very successful. Gauguin died penniless. I don't mean he wasn't very rich. I mean the man was in abject poverty on a tiny island in French Polynesia. I can't remember the name of the island exactly. He was on Tahiti for a while, but he moved off there for the last few years of his life. This tiny island is somewhere in the South Pacific between South America and Australia. It's pretty remote. And he wasn't making any money really. He couldn't even afford to buy canvas to paint on. He was painting on untreated sackcloth. Vincent van Gogh was not much, his situation was not much better. He relied on money that his brother Theo, an art dealer in Paris, was sending him every month. Without that money, Vincent would also have been in abject poverty. Next one along, Claude Monet. For the first half or so of his adult life, his career as an artist, he was also very poor, making very little money. In those days, Impressionism, it wasn't really appreciated. People didn't really get what they were trying to do, and it was difficult to sell the Impressionist paintings. Towards the end of his life, though, well, the last few decades of his life, Claude Monet found that Impressionism became very popular. And if you were going to buy an Impressionist painting, well, why not buy a Claude Monet? After all, he was Mr. Impressionism. He pretty much started the genre. So, last couple of decades of his life, Claude Monet was earning, in modern money, at least $1 million US dollars a year from the sale of his paintings. So I think for most of us would consider that a substantial amount of income, a pretty healthy income. Picasso was another step up from that. It's said that Picasso, by the time he was in his late 20s, was financially secure from his art, sale of his art. By the time he was in his mid-40s, early 50s, he was a rich man. And by the time of his death, his estate after his death was estimated to be worth somewhere between, in modern money, somewhere between 500 million US dollars and 1 billion US dollars. So yeah, he was a very rich man. So why am I talking about all of this? Well, I wanted to give a realistic spectrum of possible outcomes. If you decide to go down the route of being a full-time artist, what can you expect? Well, you could end up like Picasso as a billionaire, or you could end up like Gauguin as penniless. All of those things were possible back in the day, and they're still possible these days. So the idea that everybody who becomes a full-time artist is going to become rich or even just make enough to get by, it's not necessarily true. You don't often hear the stories of people who fail or the people who are struggling, but I can tell you from personal experience that that is the case for a lot of people. Okay, so all of those artists, those 4 artists, that's from the past. What about today? How realistic is it to say you can make a living as an artist, independent artist today? By independent artist, I mean you're self-employed. You're not employed by someone. There are artists out there who are employed by maybe companies like Disney, for example, in their animation studios. I'm just talking about people who are self-employed as artists. How realistic, how feasible is that? It's difficult to get exact data and statistics because I don't think a lot of people are particularly interested in this sector. There's not many people studying it. But I did find at least a few online reports that were looking at some of the numbers. There is an organization in England called the Arts Council of England, and they did a survey about 7 or 8 years ago asking a bunch of independent artists about their income from art and how they earn a living, how they get by. Briefly, they found that about 70% of the artists had to take on part-time jobs in order to supplement the income that they were making from their art. So straight away you can say, is it feasible? If I quit my job, can I make money as an artist? You might be in that 30% who can make money just as an artist, or perhaps more likely you might be in the 70% who need to take on some sort of part-time job or have some other income source to supplement what they're making from their art. It doesn't necessarily have to be a part-time job in the sense that you're employed by someone. One of the things that I've tried doing in the past is writing. And I've had a few companies, as a freelance writer, few companies paying me money to write blogs for them. Now they're not, when I say writing, I'm not talking about fiction writing. It's not very exciting sort of writing. I've written articles, for example, on such topics as kitchen cabinets, or a company that fixes water damage to foundations, house foundations. Exciting things like that. But it does bring in a bit of extra money, and I do enjoy the challenge of trying to write articles. So there are possibilities out there for earning a bit of extra income. Another possibility, and this is just something I wanted to mention, I think it's interesting. It's not going to be applicable to most people, but it's interesting nonetheless, I think. So here in Ireland, there's an organization called NCFA, which is the National Campaign for the Arts. It's not a government organization. They're just a bunch of volunteers who are passionate about arts and culture. They also produce some reports, some surveys on arts and artists. And they also sit down with government and try to persuade government to spend some of that taxpayers' money on arts and culture. And a few years ago, they did succeed in getting some investment from the government. And this investment was in the form of what they called a basic income for artists, or basic income for the arts. It's a pilot scheme. It started in 2022 and finishes next year. After that, it may continue, or it may just die, and that's it. That's the end of it. But the idea is this: if you qualify, the government will give you 325 euros per week. That's about $350 US, give or take. And you get that, and sort of no strings attached. They just give you that money because you're an artist. It is taxable. You have to declare it on your taxes and things, plus all your other income. But you're getting that from the government, 325 euros, $350 US. Obviously, this is, for some people, that might seem like a very small amount of money. For others, like me, it's a huge amount of money, and we make a huge difference, financially speaking. In some cases, it's enough to free up the artist so that they can focus 100% on making art. And then, of course, they're still trying to generate more income from making their art, but at least they have this foundation, this bit of money coming in every week that they can sort of rely on, and they know at least it's going to pay for some of the things they have to pay for. I say it's an interesting idea. I've never heard of any other countries doing it. I have heard of this sort of universal income or basic income being paid. I think the Finnish government in Finland, they had a similar scheme, but it was more general. It wasn't just for artists. I don't know what happened with that scheme. I think maybe it was considered unsuccessful. Hopefully the scheme in Ireland will be considered successful for artists. I think it's a very interesting idea. I think it's one way of supporting, for government to support artists. It's not going to be popular with everybody. There are, I'm sure, a lot of people out there thinking, what's so special about artists? Why should they get paid? Why doesn't the government give me money every week? So there will be a lot of, from a political point of view, there'll be people who don't support the idea. But as I say, it's an interesting idea. And for a lot of artists, it would certainly be beneficial, I think. Okay, well, sum up. Is it possible to make money from art? Can you become a full-time artist? Yes, you can. But you're probably going to have to supplement your income, especially in the early few years. Maybe part-time jobs, doing something else. You'll need to be somewhat entrepreneurial in your approach to earning an income, I think. This idea in Ireland of a basic income for artists, it's an interesting one. I don't know how many countries would want to do that, how many governments would be willing to spend taxpayers' money on that. Plus, of course, for example, here in Ireland, there's going to be a general election in the next few months, next year or so, and the government will quite possibly change. And if you get a new government, they might come in and say, that scheme has nothing to do with us, that was not our idea, we're stopping all funding for that scheme. That could easily happen, and then the artists are kind of stuck again in a difficult situation. But anyway, it's an interesting idea, so I wanted to share it with everybody on this channel. If you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching and listening, and hopefully see you again in next week's video.